On July 16, 1861, 22-year-old Louis Eggleston of Schwamico signed up to fight in the Civil War. Louis was enlisted to the 6th Wisconsin Infantry Regiment as a drummer. Soon after, he quickly was made a soldier. Louis signed his papers in Shiocton, Wisconsin, which is located in Outagamie County. He served for 3 years until he was injured in battle and died due to his injuries. Louis Eggleston had signed up voluntarily when he was called and placed on Wisconsin to assist in the war effort. Louis signed up on Company H of the 6th Regiment as a drummer. Louis quickly moved through the ranks to obtain the position of an infantry soldier. Louis was able to obtain the ranks as a corporal. Louis served a 3-year term. Louis Eggleston died July 26, 1863. Louis died at the age of 25. Louis was never married. On July 26, 1863, at the Battle of the Railroad Cut, Louis H. Eggleston, Lieutenant Remington, Cornelius W. O'Kee, and Cornelius W. O'Kee were the forefront of the was at the forefront of trying to achieve the 2nd Mississippi Infantry flag. As they continued down the battlefield, Corporal Eggleston was to the left of the flag. Remington was to the middle and O'Kee was located on the right. The enemy fire was heavy, making it difficult to breathe as these three men continue the suit for the flag. As Lieutenant Remington was 20 feet away from the flag, he was shot down. Corporal Eggleston continued to follow Cornelius O'Kee to get the 2nd Mississippi Infantry flag. As the two soldiers, Eggleston and O'Kee, ran to the flag, gunfire continued. Corporal Eggleston was able to reach the flag and grab a hold. John O. Johnson saw that Eggleston was going to be shot or bayoneted. Johnson could not load his gun fast enough to save Eggleston. Johnson stepped in to save Eggleston and was shot. Johnson said that he thinks that the bullet went through him into Eggleston. Louis was still holding on to the flag. He was shot in both arms and Eggleston fell to the ground. O'Kee then grabbed the flag as Eggleston's good friend avenged his death. David Anderson came over and used the butt of his gun to smash the skull of the rebel who killed Eggleston. Not many people knew Louis H. Eggleston, but the people who knew him said he was a hero. Louis's friends and fellow soldiers risked their lives to save him on the battlefield. Sadly, the effort to save Louis was unsuccessful, and now he is buried here with the other heroes that died with him.
Albert Tarbox was born in 1842 in Madison, Wisconsin as a 20-year-old. As a 20-year-old, he was mustered into the war on June 26, 1861 by Rufus Dawes. Not longer after joining the 6th Wisconsin, he was promoted to sergeant. During the fight at Antietam, he was injured during combat. Then he was shot and killed in the railroad cut on July 1st, 1863, as he tried to assist his best friend, James Sullivan, who was also injured in combat. They were both in the same company. Albert Tarbox was buried at Gettysburg National Cemetery. We pay our respects to these two very brave soldiers and thank them for their service for our country.
Henry McCall. Henry signed up in Decorah, joining Company B of the 2nd Wisconsin Regiment. He served with his cousin Archibald and his uncle, Archibald's father, who was a doctor. They were in one of the first attacks at Gettysburg. Henry was shot near McPherson's Ridge in the gut. His cousin Archibald was there holding his head as he died. Just a couple hundred yards away, in the 8th Illinois Cavalry, two of Henry's cousins, Atris and George, were also attacking against the South, not even knowing their cousin was lying dead on the field. After this attack on the 1st of July, 1863, the Iron Brigade was so shot up that their glory days were over. They were in later battles, but they were never quite as great. In the end, Meade sacrificed the Iron Brigade to hold off the South long enough to have time to set up defenses and hold on to the high ground.
Orrin D Chapman was part of Company C of the 6th Wisconsin. He fought valiantly at Gettysburg, but unfortunately he was fatally wounded and died on July 1st, 1863. Orrin enlisted to the Union Army on July 16, 1861. He fought in the battles of Gainesville, Second Bull Run, Antietam, Fredericksburg, and finally Gettysburg, where his wounds were fatal. The night before he died, he listened to his tent mate play Home Sweet Home on a harmonica. This was probably a pretty bittersweet moment for him, because even the enemies would get together and sing songs about home. Chapman was also a very good singer, and he had a choir with Johnny Tickmore of Company K and Edwin A. Brown of Company E. They would sing songs to keep the morale in the division high. Today here on this site, we honor him for his bravery and valor in the Civil War. We will respect him for his sacrifice and all that he did for our nation, now free of slavery. All that he did for this country is going to be appreciated for ages.
Edward Lehman was a member put into Company E of the 6th Wisconsin Volunteer Infantry, and would go on to serve his country for 3 years and would only see action at Gettysburg. Edward was not married. He had blue eyes with dark hair and also a dark complexion. He would be as tall as 5 feet and 9.5 inches, and he would work as a blacksmith in Fond du Lac County. The only time that Edward was absent was March 6th and 7th of 1863, which is unknown why. One day he was being led by Rufus Dawes, and he went to fight at the railroad cut, or also known as the Bloody Railroad Cut. Then he was shot, and his injuries were too severe, and he later died from them. He would later go on to be buried at Section D at Grave 19. He died at age 22, 1841, 1863. 1841 through 1863.
During 1848, George H. Stevens joined the 7th Regiment and was promoted to 4th Sergeant slightly later. He served for about 4 years, then resigned and left to go to Australia for a while. In 1855, he returned to his previous company. 1856 came, and he moved back to Milwaukee. There he became an important member of the 2nd Company Light Guard, and later in his membership, he became orderly sergeant. He also won a medal as a prize for an exhibition drill. The fall of 1858, he moved to Fox Lake Village and opened up his own store. Later winter came, and he became Citizens Guard, one of the best drilled companies in the area. After that, his company became A of the 2nd Regiment. Later, at the Battle of First Bull Run, he showed amazing bravery. He had command of his regiment during the Second Bull Run because it had followed the loss of the lieutenant colonel and major. During fall, he was promoted to major and then lieutenant colonel in early 1863. Sadly, during the first day of Gettysburg, he received a fatal wound and died on July 5th, 1863.
Abe Fletcher was a member of Company K of the 6th Wisconsin Volunteer Infantry. In the ranks of that federal unit, he faced overwhelming odds as he stood in line of battle on July 1st, 1863. His wounds were mortal, and he died from his injuries on July 5, 1863. Abe, as he was called by many, was enlisted into federal service on July 16, 1861 by Rufus Dawes. He sought action at Shiloh, Fredericksburg, Antietam, and Gettysburg. Mourned by his family and friends, his mortal remains rest here until the day of judgment. On this day, we honor his sacrifice and thank him for his service and sacrifice to our nation.
Frank King was a private of Company E in the 6th Wisconsin Infantry. He was number 84. He was mustered in on June 22, 1861, in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. He was mustered in by Captain Bragg for 3 years. Frank was mustered to Madison on July 16, 1861. He was 19 years old and single. His eyes were brown, his hair was dark, and his complexion was dark. Frank stood at 6 foot 6.5 inches tall. Before he went into the war, he was a miner in the town of Fond du Lac in the county of Fond du Lac. He was absent on March 8th due to sickness. Frank was killed during the charge at the railroad cut on July 1st, 1863. Frank was a soldier who never missed a fight or neglected duty. Frank was full of stories and a camp singer.
The Angel of Gettysburg. Elizabeth Thorn, also known as the Angel of Gettysburg, was pregnant with her 4th child during the Battle of Gettysburg. Elizabeth and her husband Peter Thorn were both immigrants from Germany. They married in 1855, then settled in Gettysburg. Peter later went on to serve in the Union Army. While he was serving, Elizabeth was running a cemetery near their house. The Thorn house was used as the headquarters during the battle for General Oliver Otis Howard. Elizabeth was an extremely stubborn woman, and Howard needed a guide to show him where the roads led. He asked for many men to help him, but they were fearful, so they denied his request. Elizabeth then insisted on showing him the way. Her offer was first refused, but no one else would lead him, so he then accepted her offer. This took much courage and patriotism because they were in the line of fire of the enemy in the process. Howard then asked for the Thorn family to take refuge in their cellar. They then fled to the cellar. They were there for approximately 2 to 3 hours while the battle was going. After that period of time, they were then told to leave and get as far as they could on foot in 10 minutes with nothing but the children. Around midnight, on the 2nd day of the battle, Elizabeth, her children, and her father were on their way back to the house. When they left their neighbor's house, they walked past a room with Union men wounded and sleeping. One man signaled Elizabeth over. He was missing his children desperately, so he asked if her children could sleep near him for comfort after the battle. The day the Thorn family fled to the country, they went to a farmhouse where the wounded men were being treated. She then saw men's amputated legs being tossed into a corn crib and being taken away by the wagon load. After 5 days in the country, the family went home. There was almost nothing left behind. No window glass or anything. The only thing left was 3 feather beds full of blood and mud. Elizabeth then asked a nearby officer if she would get paid for her things being spoiled and taken. His reply was simply no. She then sent for 3 women to help get out the stains, which took 4 days to get out. She then got a note from the president of the cemetery saying that they will need to bury soldiers in their cemetery for now. Elizabeth and her aged father lasted for days burying the soldiers. They then sent word for help, and 2 people came. They both got deathly sick within a week, so they went home with good wages. The family kept on working until the National Cemetery was ready to take the soldiers. By that time, Elizabeth and her father had buried 105 soldiers. 3 months later, she had her first daughter named Rose. Peter Thorn survived the war and returned to the cemetery. Elizabeth and Peter died within months of each other, with Elizabeth being 78 and Peter being 81. They both are now buried in their Evergreen Cemetery.
Jenny Wade was born on May 21, 1843 at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Jenny's house has been around for over 150 years. but the walls on the inside of the house explain the story of Jenny Wade from many years ago. Jenny and her mother fled from Breckenridge Street for the upcoming war, and ran to stay with Jenny's sister, Georgia McClellan. This was because Georgia was to give birth just before the Confederates arrived in Gettysburg. In the battle, the Wades and McClellans gave out bread to the wounded Union soldiers. A while later, Confederate soldiers began firing 150 shots at the house. One mini bullet in particular fired through 2 doors and struck Jenny in the back of her shoulder. It penetrated her heart and ended her life at 8:30 a.m. on July 3, 1863. Jenny's body was carried to a cellar to be buried later. However, her mother baked 15 loaves of bread for any hungry Union soldiers. Jenny's fiancé, Corporal Jack Skelly, in the 87th Pennsylvania, was wounded in the Battle of Winchester and died on July 12th. He was never informed of Jenny's death. Neither was Jenny of his. Jenny today is buried next to Skelly, here in the Evergreen Cemetery. This monument marks her resting place, as well as the eternal American flag that flies day and night.